Okay, Assalamu alaikum and good evening to everyone. So in today's session, we are going to study about investigational use of the drug. So there are many medicines which are under investigation, and these medicines are also to be handled by both the physician as well as pharmacist. So to handle such medicine, there are some guidelines that we have to follow. There are certain procedure and there are certain documentation that we need to maintain in order to use the investigational drug. So let's see these guidelines and these procedures. First, remember that the compound or the mixture that has not been released by the FDA for the general distribution and use, so such compounds are called as the investigational or the research drug. So these are the compound or the mixture that have not been released by the FDA for general distribution and use. What it means? It means that these drugs are not available in the medical store for the general distribution, because general distribution of medicine, it is conducted through the medical store. So all investigational drugs are not available in a medical store, and their usage, it is strictly controlled, especially by the chief investigator or the physician who is conducting that particular study. It means that these drugs are under investigation, and if you use these drugs which are under investigation, then there could be the problem, because these drugs may having the adverse effect and their data, it is not available. Since the data, it is not available, so you are not aware that whether these drugs are the safe, or they may be producing some life threatening adverse effect to the patient. So you have to be very cautious about usage of such drugs. So if you see the label on these drugs, so these drugs have the following statement on their label. For example, caution. Second could be the new drug. Third could be the limited. So why this label has been posted on, especially on the label paper of investigational drug, you can ensure the safe use of the drug. Now, if the label caution is there, it means the patient is also get alerted. The physician who is administering that particular medicine, he will also alert, and he will strictly supervise that patient in order to avoid any unavoidable circumstances or any life-threatening adverse effects and side effect of that particular drug. Likewise, in some label, new drug it is mentioned, in some label, limited it is mentioned. It means these drugs are limited only to that patient to whom you have identified as a subject to conduct your study. Whereas other patient you cannot give without their proper agreement, isn't it? So these are three important labels. One, it is the caution. Second one, it is the new drugs. And third one, it is the limited. So the investigational drugs are only released to the physician. As I mentioned, these are not released to the pharmacist. These are only released to the physician, so that drug, it is dispensed by the physician, administered by the physician, and also it is strictly supervised by the physician who might be acting as the chief investigator or maybe authorized investigator under the protocol. So these are the very important information which is related to investigational use of the drug. Next part, it is regarding the primary center for clinical investigation. Now, as I have mentioned, these drugs are not given to the pharmacist. It means these drugs are only available in the hospital where you are conducting the research or you are conducting the investigation. So the primary center for clinical investigation on new drugs are always the hospital. Without hospital, you cannot give these drugs. For example, there are many patients who are discharged and you are giving the discharge medicine. So no investigational drug, it is given as a discharge medicine, because this drug has to be supervised. Patient has to be supervised after administration of the investigational product. Okay. Next, it is the investigational drug have not been certified for the general use and sale. So you cannot sell or you cannot use it for the general use, okay, because it is the investigational product. And in interstate commerce by the FDA, as a business point of view, as a profit-making sale, you cannot use investigational drug, okay, unless it has passes that stage of the approval. Therefore, the hospital and their medical staff, they have responsibility, especially to check proper procedure for use of these drugs. So you have to ensure that as per protocol, you are using the drug. So as a pharmacist, you must aware of all these important parts of the usage of the investigational drug. Now let's see about the principle involved in the uses of investigational drugs. So there are different principles, and those principles you have to follow whenever you are using investigational drugs. Okay, so let's see those principles. So the first principle, it is the principle of institutional. So what are the institutional principles that you have to follow as an institution? For example, if this research it is undergoing in the Saifi hospital. Now Saifi hospital, it is one of the institution. So as an institution, they have certain responsibility towards appropriate use of investigational drug. Now, what are those responsibilities? So first responsibility is that an institution being set for the investigational drug study should guarantee adequate safeguard for itself, obviously, because if any nuances it is happen, anything which is wrong happened to the patient, suppose the death of the patient due to usage of investigational drug, then there must be the policy where the institution can maintain their own safeguard. Their staff are involved in the research. So if there is such a death of the patient, so the most vulnerable people are the doctor, because patient के जो relative होते हैं, they will put threat on these doctors who have given the drug. However, they are dealing there as a part of the process. Chief investigator, it is someone else. So there must be the provision in order to guarantee the safeguard for the hospital, the safeguard of the staff working for those investigational drugs, and also the patient as well. So death हो गया इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि you do not, as a hospital, you do not have any responsibility towards the patient. So there must be something like insurance must be made available, some benefit to be given to the family member of that patient. Also, if there is no death, there are adverse effects, then some policy should be there, so that as a hospital, you should take care of those adverse effects that patients suffering from. Suppose if there is long-term disease that patients suffer due to investigational drug, then as a hospital, you should have the provision to provide some financial benefit and some benefit to the patient where he can take care of those disease which happen due to the investigational drug. Okay. And a most important part, it is the scientific integrity of the study. So any information that you gather out of this study, for example, drug XYZ, it produces so and so side effect. So you cannot put that information under the carpet. You have to put that information in public domain. आपको public में declare करना है in the form of the publication, and you should not hide any data. So that is called as scientific integrity. So you have to be very truthful whenever you are working as a chief investigator or a part of the staff member in such research which is related to investigational drug. In addition to that, institution should have written procedure and the policies. ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि you are doing procedure on the basis of your experience. No, all the procedures should be written well in advance. उसका आप approval भी लोगे from the particular authority who is involved in the reviewing of the protocol of the investigational product. So written procedures are required, written policies are required, and you have to only go through that research policy and procedures. If you feel that as a senior experienced physician or senior experienced the investigator, if at any point, if you feel that they need to change the procedure, so there is possibility of amendment, but that amendment is also subjected to the approval of the reviewing body. Without approval, you cannot do the amendments on yourself. Okay, so the institution should have written procedure and the policies which is related to the investigational drug. Okay, and these policies you have to strictly follow. Okay, especially for the approving, managing, and controlling investigational drug studies. So there is some policies for that, both for approving. Also, suppose your investigational process is being approved by the reviewing committee, then after that also there is process for managing that research work. Also the controlling that research work. Suppose you have initiated the study and at any given point of time you feel that you need to stop the study due to the result or unusual result that you have received. So there must be the procedure. So how you are going to interrupt the study, how you are going to stop the study, how you are going to amend the study. So there are the procedure and you have to follow that procedures which are related to investigational drug studies. Okay, so this is the first principle. So we call it as the principle of institutional. Okay, so institutional principle. Let's see the second principle, that is called as the principle of voluntariness. Now, obviously, when you are giving in any investigational drug product, obviously you cannot give to patient without his willingness. Okay, because every patient he feel that he should get safe and the drug which is already established as a good drug in the market. So the principle of voluntariness is, it says that the participant patient should freely agree to get treated with the investigational drug. So now when we say that the patient is agreed or he is willing to get treated by that investigational drug, it doesn't mean that this is just oral agreement. It must be the written agreements. Okay, and this written agreement which is happened between the participants and the chief investigator or the institution who is involved in the clinical trial, it should be written in nature. So this is called as the consent form. Okay, so this agreement, it should be acquired either from the patient, or if patient is not in condition of giving the agreement, suppose he is the mentally disturbed patient, or maybe the patient who is the unconscious, the patient who is in the coma. Obviously, these are the situations where patient will not give his own agreement. Then in such case, you can take the agreement from his or her legal authorized representative before beginning the treatment. So this is very compulsory. And this document, we called it as a consent form. So the patient should be well informed regarding the objective of the study. So if you say that it is not just you are saying that whether you are agreed to this treatment, that is not the case. And just patient saying yes and doing the signature, that is not the case. In addition to that, you are giving all that information that is patient is asking about that drug. But sometimes patient may not ask to the physician or the chief investigator, but as your responsibility, you have need to convey all that information which is required so that patient can understand how much is safety towards the drug, how much is the risk related to the drug, isn't it? So the objective of the study, related risk and the benefit should be well informed to the patient. Okay, so this is the principle of the voluntariness, where we know that the written agreement in the form of informed consent, it is compulsory. Okay, third principle, it is the principle of the documentation. So name itself indicates that you need to keep the appropriate documents. Okay, so it is the responsibility of the chief investigator to regulate the proper maintenance of the case report form. Now, what do you mean by case report form? For example, if you have given certain drug to the patient and you have collected different data related to their side effect, their adverse effect, their safety, then you may say their pharmacological effect, okay, how much is drug it is effective, and then their excretion and all that data you have noted. Okay, so you are going to note this data in the form of case report form. So you need to maintain as a chief investigator all the case report form and other records needed in the study by the institution, drug sponsor. So there are person who is providing financial support for this research, and also for the presentation to the FDA. Okay, so maintenance of documentation, it is utmost important. And most important documents among this, it is the case report form. I hope you will remember this document. You should not forget this. It is the case report form, which is very important document, which says about how drug it is working with that patient. So that you have to maintain. Then fourth point of the principle, it is the all drug information. So as a principal investigator, the drug information has to be provided. So the drug control system of the institution that should provide the proper packaging and labeling system. That is very important part, because the labeling system only going to provide information related to the drug. In addition, packaging matters a lot, because if there is inappropriate packaging, there could be possibility of the degradation of the drug due to the moisture, due to the light effect, and also many things. Okay, so in order to avoid that, drugs should be provided with the proper packaging. The labeling should be provided so that adequate information related to that drugs it is available. Okay, in addition to that, you should ensure enough supply of the drug, so that when you start the treatment, so there should not be any disturbance related to that particular medicine. Then storage condition you have to provide. Dose formulation, what type of dose or how much drug it is to be given, the frequency of the dosing, okay, administration procedure. So all this information has to be provided in the form of the label. You also need to inform the nursing staff properly regarding the drug, their inventory, control system concerning investigational drug. Okay, so everyone should be well informed about all the information related to drug. So especially those who are dealing with the patient administration are the nurses, are the physician, are the pharmacists. So you must provide all required information related to that particular drug, so that the drug can be safely used in all kind of the patient. Okay, so these are the four important principles. So first principle was the institutional, second principle was the voluntariness, third principle related to documentation, and the fourth principle, it is related to drug information. I hope you will remember this principle. Next point, it is related to guideline for the institution. So if you are maybe the hospital, and these hospital has to follow particular guidelines if they are dealing with the clinical research or the investigational drug. Okay, so let's see what are those guidelines. So institution conducting clinical research should have an institutional review committee. Okay, so all those institutions conducting the research, they should have institutional review committee. For example, in our case, in the animal house, we have animal ethical committee. Likewise, if you are conducting any research related to human being, then there must be the institution, it is called as institutional review committee. Okay, and they are also known as committee on human investigation. So any investigation conducted on the human, it should be reviewed by this particular commission. So name it is review also. Okay, it is also called as clinical research committee, because whatever research you are conducting on the human being, it is called as clinical research. And this research, it is reviewed by this committee. So it is also called as clinical research committee. So there are three names to this: institutional review committee, committee on human investigation, and third one, it is clinical research committee. So every institution conducting clinical research, they must have this particular committee with proper number of the approved members on the board. Okay, now what they are doing as a part of institutional review committee, they will be evaluating every proposed clinical research study in terms of compliance with the accepted ethical, legal, and scientific standard. So their responsibility is to evaluate every proposal related to clinical research. For example, in particular institution, there are 10 clinical research are going on. Then they have to review all this proposal, and they have to ensure that this proposal procedure that has been laid down, it is properly complying with the accepted ethical, legal, and scientific standards. So this is the first guideline, which is to the institution. Second guideline is only under the supervision of member of institution professional staff. So the institution professional staff are, so the highest one, it is the chief investigator, or maybe the someone who is authorized as a co-investigator by the chief investigator. Okay, so whatever drug you are giving, you must give these drugs under the supervision of these members. So chief investigator, or maybe he must be the authorized co-investigator. So under them only you are giving the medicine. So the investigational drug should be used under the chief investigator or authorized co-investigator. Okay, so this is the second guidelines for the institution. Third important guideline, it is that it is the responsibility of chief investigator. Obviously, the chief investigator, it is the highest authority who is involved in the process of the investigation. So anything happens during the process, it is the responsibility of the chief investigator to obtain the written and informed consent from the patient to participate in the study. Now, suppose during the review or the inspection, it has been observed that informed consent has not been taken. Then who should be held responsible? He is the chief investigator. So chief investigator must be held responsible if any document is not being maintained. Okay, so the chief investigator play a very important role. The informed consent process should follow the latest federal and the state regulation. So you need to design informed consent. It should not be just yes and no type of answer, just signature of the patient. There is the process of designing informed consent. So many informed consent format are also available on the internet. As a homework, you can just do the literature survey and find the few informed consent, so that at a glance you will get the idea about the informed consent. Okay, so this is regarding the informed consent and the guideline to the institution. So institution has to follow all these guidelines. Let's see the guideline for the pharmacists. What are the guidelines for the pharmacists if you are dealing with such investigational drug? Okay, so the responsibility of the pharmacist is to check that the procedure for control of investigational drugs are developed and they are properly implemented. So as a pharmacist, you are involved in the verification of the procedure for control of the investigational drug. You are sometimes also involved in developments and implementation of these procedure while conduct of research on investigational drug. Okay, so you are the part of this study. In addition to that, a copy of approved research protocol should be kept in the pharmacy whenever the research has been done. So as a pharmacist, you need to keep all these approved research protocol in your pharmacy, especially in case of the hospital pharmacy, because always remember that institutional drugs are used only in the hospital. Pharmacy should use the protocol and the additional data, okay, which provided by the chief investigator to prepare an investigational drug data sheet. So as a pharmacy, you should use the protocol and additional data which is provided by the chief investigator to prepare an investigational drug data sheet. So you have to keep this document as well. Okay. In addition to this, the following elements should be included in the form. So what are those elements that you are including in case of the form which is designed for the investigational drugs? First thing is that the drug designation and common synonym. So you have to keep the record of drug designation and the common synonym. Then dosage form and the strain, usual dosage range and administration route, then indication, expected therapeutic effect, toxicities and their treatments, which is related to investigational drug. So these form also you have to maintain. So there is again specific format to keep all this information related to drug. So when protocol has been designed, as a part of that protocol, different format are also designed and they are approved by the institutional review committee or clinical research committee. So they approved all this format so that all the information related to the drug can be gathered during the research which is conducted on the investigational drug. Okay, so I've done with my first part of today's session. So before going ahead, let's quickly have the question and answer session. So my first question is, what statements need to be added on the label of investigational drug? And today I am expecting this answer in the chat box. Okay, very good. So 19 page 53 has given the first answer. She mentioned about, very good, caution, new drug. Okay, caution, new drug and limited. Okay, limited by law. Okay, so caution, new drug and limited. Okay, so these are the three important the labeling instruction that should be mentioned, especially in case of the investigational drug. Okay. My second question is, explain the principle of voluntariness. What do you mean by principle of voluntariness? Just try to give answer within 2 to 3 lines. Yes, let's see who give first answer. So what is expected in case of principle of voluntariness? First answer is given by 19 page 88. Mention that patient should voluntarily participate in the clinical research. Yes, he has to voluntarily participate. Patient should be informed all about the drug mentioned by 19 page 80. 19 page 73 mention about participant patient should freely agree to get treated with the drug. Very right. But how we are taking this agreement? Is it the oral agreement? And what you call that agreement को क्या कहते हैं? उस document को क्या कहते हैं? What you are calling that agreement? Very good. So 19 page 88 mentioned it must be in writing, and that agreement it is called as consent form. Okay, so you need to maintain the consent form. Okay, so which is one of the very important documents, especially in case of the clinical research. Okay, so I've done with my part 1. The